You are now listening to the first 21 minutes of Chapter 1 of Charles' Sight, Echoes of the Dead, written by a PL. Available exclusively on ScriptorianQuest.com. The morning sun bathed Lethnot in a golden radiance, its resplendent beams daring to slip through the gaps in the heavy velvet drapery. Beyond, the gentle chorus of birdsong heralded the arrival of a new day, their melodies carried upon a whispering breeze. This fleeting breath of wind offered but a moment's reprieve from the oppressive heat, as the townsfolk, already astir, embarked upon their daily quest. Punctuality was not among Charles' virtues. Enveloped in a heavy red and gold blanket, worn and mended with care, he slumbered undisturbed. His mother, Susie, made sure to add extra length for every centimeter that the 12-year-old gained. Tousled curls of chestnut brown tumbled over his brow as his hands clutched a pillow dampened by the heat of the night. The boy stirred beneath the weight of his covers, rolling to his left in a desperate bid to escape unseen phantoms conjured by his slumbering mind. His movement carried him too far, and with an abrupt thud he met the wooden floor of the cottage. A cry of shock tore from his lips, his limbs flailing as the blanket twisted around him, binding him in its suffocating embrace. From beyond the bedroom, the hurried approach of footsteps echoed through the modest dwelling, each step heightening the boy's distress. His panicked wails crescendoed as the door burst open, and in his blinded frenzy he felt rough yet gentle hands grasp his ankles. He struggled, but the enveloping fabric made him powerless. Terror seized him, and his body grew still, surrendering to fate. Silent tears traced delicate paths down his cheeks as he relinquished himself to the firm yet tender guidance of his unseen rescuer. Slowly he was drawn upright, the oppressive cocoon loosened at last. And then, suddenly a golden sunlight pierced through the bedroom, momentarily blinding him. Blinking against its brilliance, his storm-gray eyes sought to discern the figure before him. "Hey," rumbled a deep voice. The familiar tone cut through the boy's panic like the first light of dawn dispelling the night. A trembling breath escaped his lips, his shoulders sagging as an entirely new wave of tears welled in his storm-gray eyes this time, not of fear, but of profound relief. "Dad!" he cried, his voice cracking with emotion. Tears glistened as they streamed down his flushed cheeks. Yet the figure before him, steadfast and patient, moved with quiet assurance, unwrapping the tangled fabric with deliberate care. And as he did so, a small, shameful truth was revealed, a damp pool seeping into the aged wooden floor beneath the boy's legs. A moment of silence stretched between them. Then, in the same steady voice, the man spoke once more. "It's all right." With practiced ease, he shed the last layers of the imprisoning blanket, revealing the child's small, delicate fingers. His own calloused hand encased them gently. With effortless strength, he guided him to his feet, lifting him from the remnants of his fright and into the certainty of his father's presence. The golden liquid trickling down the boy's trembling legs did not so much as elicit a flicker of disdain from the man before him. With quiet patience he continued his task, unwrapping each layer of the entangling fabric. At last, the child stood before him small, disheveled, and vulnerable. His threadbare white socks, riddled with holes large enough to expose his toes, clung damply to his feet. His dark blue shorts bore the stains of sleep, and his sweat-drenched gray shirt clung uncomfortably to his frail frame. Yet the man regarded him without reproach, his only concern evident in his steady movements as he gathered the soiled blanket and set it aside. The boy remained where he stood, shifting slightly in the cooling puddle beneath him, wiping at his tear-streaked cheeks and the lingering traces of distress upon his nose. Without a word, the man reached for his hand, his grip firm yet gentle, and guided him through a narrow doorway leading to a modest adjoining room. The small bathroom, though unadorned, was warm with morning light, the golden rays dancing off the rustic red brick walls. In the quiet sanctuary of this space, the father knelt before his son, removing his soiled garments with the same unspoken tenderness. With practiced care, the cool water washes away both shame and sorrow. When the task was done, he wrapped the boy in a fresh towel, its fabric soft against his skin. Then, without a word, the man rose and departed, leaving the child alone in the quiet room. For a moment, the boy stood still, his gaze drifting to the small window that framed the world beyond. He wondered what must it be like to be free, to roam as the birds did. Closing his eyes, he let the sun's warmth envelop him, its gentle caress a fleeting promise of something greater. The chorus of bird song filled the air, their voices greeting the morning with unshaken joy. In the distance, the murmur of unseen people drifted toward him in the wind, a hushed reminder that the world was still turning, indifferent to his silent longing. And so he was brought back to reality. Burgundy or black? The deep voice of the boy's father resonated through the small room, steady and unhurried. In his hands, he held a choice, a long-sleeved sweater of dark red and a short-sleeved shirt of deepest black. The boy did not speak. Instead, he simply raised a small hand and pointed toward the sweater. Burgundy it is, the man murmured. With practiced gentleness, he eased the garment over the child's head, guiding his arms through each sleeve with quiet care. The fabric, though worn, was warm a cocoon against the lingering chill of morning. Once dressed, the man stepped out of the bathroom, walking back toward the bedroom. This time, the boy followed. The room they entered was vast yet starkly furnished. 7 beds stood in solemn uniformity, each one impeccably arranged, as though no soul had ever laid upon them. The only disruption to this pristine order lay in the bed, where the boy had slept, a disheveled pile of sheets, pillowcases discarded carelessly to the side. The once visible pool of urine had vanished, replaced by a damp sheen upon the polished wooden floorboards. He cleaned after me, the boy thought, his gaze flickering toward the man. The father, unbothered by the oppressive warmth thickening the air, busied himself with retrieving a heavy wooden chest from beneath the boy's bed. With a creaking protest, the lid was lifted, revealing its modest contents. The man sifted through the garments within, his movements unhurried as he selected a pair of underwear and a pair of shorts. "We don't have many options this time," he admitted, his voice calm but measured. He held up the shorts, beige, frayed at the edges, and bearing the unmistakable wear of time. They had seen better days. The boy approached without hesitation, resting a small hand upon his father's broad shoulder. With quiet grace, he accepted the garments. He did not speak, nor did he need to. The man met his gaze for a moment, before nodding. "All right," he said, rising to his full height. "I'll wait for you in the kitchen." With that, he strode toward the heavy wooden door. At the threshold, he cast one last glance over his shoulder, his expression unreadable as he met the boy's stare. Then, without another word, he stepped through the doorway, pulling it closed behind him. The boy remained still, listening intently as his father's footsteps receded into the distance. Only when the sound had faded beyond the thick wooden walls did he move. Clutching his clothes in one hand, he stepped toward the window, his free fingers brushing aside the delicate floral curtains. From his vantage point, he surveyed the world beyond a vast expanse of solitude. Their home stood atop a secluded hill, far removed from prying eyes and away from civilization in general. It was a place of silence, where only the wind and the distant murmurs of the earth kept them company. A flicker of color caught his gaze. A blue butterfly, vibrant and delicate, flitted before him, its wings shimmering in the golden light. A rare smile curved his lips. Tentatively, he reached out, giggling as he tried in vain to catch the tiny creature. It had been so long since laughter had bubbled from his chest, so long since joy had come. His father's lack of humor didn't help, though he was a man of boundless love and unyielding care. The weight of his past had drained him of all light. No matter how deeply his father cherished him, no matter how fiercely he protected him, the boy still felt his absence, an aching, invisible abyss that stretched between them. His father was there, yet he was not. The spirit of Raj had withered beneath the burden of sorrow. Once a man of formidable strength, He had clung to life with the desperation of an infant, grasping for its mother until grief's relentless tide had pulled him beneath its depth. And all because of the event. A memory stirred in the boy's mind, unforgiving. It had begun as an ordinary day in Thaku, the neighborhood of his childhood. Unlike their lonely hilltop refuge, Thaku had been a world of close-knit houses stacked upon one another like precarious bricks, the air thick with the voices of too many souls crammed into too little space. His parents had despised it, their complaints as constant as the city's hum, but for a boy of his age, it had been paradise. There, he had known the unbreakable bond of brotherhood. Elias, Owen, and Martin, his three closest companions, had been his world. Their friendships were stitched together with the threads of time itself, woven from the moment of their births. Elias's mother had even been there when the boy took his first breath, guiding his mother through labor in their cramped living room. Hospitals were not places for people like them, and they were especially not places for boys. From the time he could walk, Charles had been warned, whispered cautions, murmured fears. The Romans, men who lurked in the shadows of desperate neighborhoods, seeking what could not be easily replaced. It was said that wealthy families sent these nameless figures to steal away their sons. Those who were taken never returned. None, except Charles. That fateful day, 6 years past, had begun in laughter. The four boys had gathered at the park, their laughter ringing through the streets as they played a simple game, who could send the ball soaring highest into the sky. Each of them took turns, hurling it with all the force their young arms could muster, delighting in the challenge. Then came Elias's turn. Taller and stronger than the rest, he sent the yellow and blue ball rocketing into the sky. It landed near a bench. None of them had noticed the three men seated there. Strangers were not unusual in Thaku. The neighborhood swelled with new faces each day, the city's hardship forcing families into ever tighter quarters. The boys paid them no mind. Owen, the swiftest of them all, despite his small frame, darted toward the bench to retrieve the ball. One of the men leaned forward, his fingers curling around it. And then he smiled. Extending the ball toward Owen, he gestured to give it to him. Began Owen, his voice barely escaping his lips. The instant his hand reached for the ball, the man's grip tightened, yanking the boy toward him with brutal force. "Grab them!" the man barked. The two others on the bench sprang to their feet with practiced speed, their movements swift, precise like wolves, descending upon helpless prey. Time unraveled into a sluggish blur. Charles turned his head, his pulse roaring in his ears. Elias and Martin stood frozen, their mouths agape, the light of innocent amusement extinguished by sudden terror. "Run!" Charles bellowed. His father had prepared him for this moment. "You do not look back ever. Just run. Do you hear me?" Raj's voice had been a constant echo in his childhood, a warning drilled into him with relentless urgency. "Yes, Dad," Charles had often sighed, weary of the repetition. "You know, Dad, I'm not important enough for them to take me." "It is exactly because you are not important that they will take you." His father's voice had been steel, his gaze unyielding. "No one thinks about people like us. We are invisible, expendable." And now those words have become prophecies. Charles turned on his heel, forcing his limbs to obey, to move. But then a scream. Elias's voice, raw with horror. Charles made the fatal mistake. He looked back. Martin lay crumpled on the ground, his small frame motionless. Elias thrashed in the arms of a man twice his size, his head snapping back as a needle plunged into his neck. A sickening moment of stillness followed before Elias's body slumped. Charles had no time to process the implications, no time to grieve, to scream, to fight. A second Romer was upon him. The man's footsteps pounded against the earth so close that Charles could feel the tremor beneath his feet. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he did not dare falter. "Run, run, run." He thought of his mother's gentle smile, his father's strong embrace. If he stopped now, He would never see them again. With every ounce of strength left in his body, Charles veered sharply to the left, darting towards Sully's Alley, a narrow passageway his father had told him about, a path known only to those who belonged to the streets of Fakku. The roamer's fingers brushed past his ear, so close that he could feel the whisper of air against his skin. A near miss. Adrenaline surged through his veins, fueling his exhausted limbs. "Mom!" he screamed. "Dad, please!" And then blinding pain. Something struck the back of his head with brutal finality. Darkness swallowed him whole. As the butterfly drifted toward the garden, its delicate wings catching the morning light, Charles was pulled from his reverie. A quiet sigh escaped his lips as he let the curtain fall back into place. His father was waiting. With measured movements, he turned and dressed, slipping into the garments his father had selected. There was no mirror in the bedroom. There had once been one, but his father had removed it the day Charles arrived. For that, the boy was grateful. He had no desire to see his own reflection. Instead, his gaze fell upon the makeshift calendar that hung upon the stone wall. He stepped forward, retrieving the pen that lay beside it, and carefully etched a cross over the date. "I know that you are not ready to talk about it, and I will not pressure you," his father had told him 6 weeks ago. "But this will help you keep track of your freedom." At the time, the calendar had meant nothing to him. It had been a trivial thing, a poor attempt at structure in a world that had long since crumbled. What did days matter to a boy who had survived 6 years of unrelenting terror? Now, though, it was an anchor, a silent testament to the days he had reclaimed. He closed the calendar and, with a deep breath, stepped toward the door. The bedroom was situated at the farthest end of the cottage. As he moved through the narrow corridor, his fingers traced the rough stone walls, savoring their cool, unyielding texture. The sensation grounded him, steadied his thoughts. At last, he reached the door that separated the sleeping quarters from the rest of the house. He hesitated only for a moment before turning the handle. The moment it swung open, a voice rang out. "Come on." Charles barely had time to register the call before a boy darted past him on the right, half out the door. Before he could process whether the boy had been speaking to him, another appeared on his left. "Wow!" exclaimed the tall, slender boy, nearly colliding with Charles. His feet skidded against the polished tile, sending him hurtling toward the marble column upon which rested a delicate flower pot. Disaster loomed until Charles reacted with instinctive swiftness, seizing the boy's wrist and yanking him back. Unfortunately, the force of his pull unbalanced them both, and they tumbled unceremoniously onto the unforgiving floor. "Are you guys okay?" The shorter boy, who had been halfway out the door, halted abruptly, rushing back to assist Charles, whose body was now trapped beneath the taller boy. Charles grunted, rubbing his elbows, his breath momentarily stolen by the impact. "That was quite the fall," came a melodic voice from behind them. All 3 boys turned their heads in unison. A woman stood before them, her presence commanding yet tender. She wore an ankle-length lavender dress adorned with black roses, its fabric swaying gently as she moved. Her skin, dark and radiant, shimmered beneath the soft light filtering through the windows. Cascading down her back was a mane of jet-black hair, as lustrous as a raven's wing. The moment they beheld her, the 2 other boys straightened, invigorated by her presence. In a show of exaggerated helpfulness, they hastily pulled Charles to his feet, the taller one even brushing the dust from his shoulder. "We're fine, Mrs. Mackenzie," the shorter boy declared with a broad grin. "I'm relieved to hear it." Her warm gaze flickered to Charles, who had turned his eyes downward, staring at his feet. "Why don't you 2 run along?" she suggested, gently taking Charles's wrist. "Charles here will have his breakfast first." She flashed them a knowing smile. The boys hesitated momentarily before the taller one gave a quick wave, only to be unceremoniously yanked away by his shorter companion. With a soft chuckle, Mrs. Mackenzie shut the door behind them before kneeling before Charles, her dark eyes searching his. "Are you hurt?" she asked softly. Charles averted her gaze. "Of course you are," she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with emotion. Tears welled in her eyes, but she swallowed them down. "Come," she said, straightening as she dusted her flowing dress. She took her son's hand in hers, her grasp gentle yet firm. They walked together in silence, their footsteps echoing softly against the cool stone walls, until they entered a vast circular room. Sunlight cascaded through a grand skylight above, illuminating the floor-to-ceiling windows that lined the room. The warmth of the sun seemed almost alive, as though it sought to embrace them. "Sit, darling. I'll bring you a meal," his mother murmured, pressing a tender kiss upon his head before moving away. Charles lowered himself into a chair, his gaze instinctively lifting toward the ceiling. The skylight above was a masterpiece, a breathtaking mosaic depicting figures clad in vibrant robes, their forms swirling in a dance of color. At the heart of the mosaic was a face with piercing, luminous eyes. On days like this, when the sun was at its peak, those eyes shone with an almost ethereal brilliance. Charles could never look away. There was something there, something beyond mere art. A connection, a whisper of a secret only he and the man in the mosaic could understand.